Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hello there. Welcome to the 10th episode of the What Bitcoin Did podcast. And I think this is probably my most important interview to date. I mentioned previously that even though this podcast started out as interviews with traders, I'm getting more exposure to other stories within the crypto space, which I find pretty interesting. This morning, I met with and interviewed a lady by the name of Lyn Ulbricht, who is the mother of Ross Ulbricht. He received a double life sentence plus 40 years for his role as the founder of the dark web marketplace, the Silk Road, and he will essentially die in prison if they are unsuccessful in their appeal to the Supreme Court. If you are not aware of Ross or the Silk Road and wondering what this has to do with Bitcoin, well, the Silk Road was an anonymous marketplace which allowed people to purchase items, primarily drugs, on the dark web anonymously using Bitcoin. And if you read the book Digital Gold, and whichever side of the debate you sit on, you will see the important role that the Silk Road played in Bitcoin's history, as it was the first real use case for people to spend Bitcoin. The website was operated under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, and ultimately Ross was arrested and charged with being this person, along with a number of other charges, which you can find out on Wikipedia or read about on the free Ross website, but I will share this within the show notes. It's definitely an emotive subject, and it definitely splits opinion. Since I announced the interview, I've already had a handful of debates around topics related to the interview, and I can understand arguments on both sides. Should drugs be illegal? Should we have the choice to put in our body what we want? You know, is Ross a criminal, or is he somebody who fought for freedom for others, for freedom of choice? Many would argue that the war on drugs has failed, and therefore the Silk Road was a better alternative to the violence and dangers around buying drugs. Should we allow people to buy anonymously and buy in a protected environment, or do we want people to go down back streets? Do we want gangs, or do we want these operated in a more stable environment online? Currently, it's obviously in most markets, it is illegal, but the Silk Road definitely challenged the current way in which drugs are bought and consumed. And on a personal level, the Silk Road paved the way for the website which my family used to purchase a treatment for my mother's cancer, which wasn't available for us to purchase outside of the dark web. Did I see this as a crime? No, I didn't. And did I care for the consequences? No, I didn't at all. It was a necessity for us to help treat our mother. And therefore, this is an interesting area that does need investigating for me. So whatever your opinion, I do encourage you to look at the facts of the case. There are things around it which I found concerning when I was researching. And do I think Ross is innocent? No, not within the legal framework. But do I think he did something of value? Sure. But he broke the law. As such, a penalty is to be expected. But is a double life sentence plus 40 years? Is that the right punishment? I think it's excessive. If you want to support the show, I ask this every week. Please do share this out, especially this episode. I think it's an important one. I think it's important for people to hear from Lyn. So please do share it out. If you can leave me a review on iTunes, good or bad, I'll appreciate it. I hope you like the show enough to give us a 5-star review. If you have any questions, and specifically around the show, if you want to talk about it, I do try and respond to anyone. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, Steam it, on Medium. My handle on every social channel is @WhatBitcoinDid. I also have a website. You can sign up there for a newsletter or read my blog post. I will probably write something about this. The website address is www.whatbitcoindid.com. And as I said earlier, please do share this out because it helps the show as well. So now for the interview. I encourage you to keep an open mind. As I mentioned, do visit the free Ross website. There is a lot of useful information on there, and there are a lot of confusing things around the case and things that need questioning and I think warrant further discussion. I think there are plenty of unanswered questions and hopefully the Supreme Court will see this and allow for the case to be reheard. If you have any feedback, please do give me a shout. Please do get in touch. Okay, I hope you do enjoy this show. Hi, Lyn.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good.
It's
great to meet you.
Ross's birthday.
It sure is.
He's
34.
34 today. Will you get a chance to speak to him?
I hope so. I can't call him, but he will probably call us, you know.
What does he get in terms of phone calls? Does he allowed one a day? Or?
He's allowed 300 minutes a month.
Right.
And when that runs out, he can't call. And if they're on lockdown, which they have been quite a bit in this particular prison because it's very violent there, there's no phone calls.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how often do you get to see Ross?
When I'm in Colorado, I can see him 3 days a week for 5 hours a day.
Okay.
It's a good long visit. It's great. We get to really hang out and, you know, talk about the case, talk about all of that stuff, but we can also hang out and just be with each other and play cards sometimes, or, you know, just in a relaxed way, because we have lots of time, you know, be able to just be with each other. And that's fairly new. It wasn't true in New York.
And how has he taken to prison, and has he managed to build friendships and avoid violent situations? Are the other inmates good to him?
Yeah, you know, Ross is a very likable guy, and that applies in prison or outside prison. So he's very sweet. He's very nice, and he helps. Like in New York, he led classes. I mean, 4 inmates. There's 100 letters on our website from people who know Ross talking about him. 4 of those are inmates who wrote about. One of them wrote about how he helped them get into college, a remote course, GED. He helped them get their high school diploma. So these 100 letters are very indicative of who Ross really is. People who actually know him and talk about his character and his, you know, his peacefulness and his compassion and his generosity. And in prison, that's what happens. And he does have friends. There's a guy actually in there named Tony DeJohn who has a life sentence for marijuana. Totally peaceful guy. No violence in his sentence, just like with Ross's. There's no violence in his sentence.
Full life?
He got life for marijuana, selling marijuana 15 years ago. He's done 15 years. He's got a life sentence.
Wow.
Outrageous. Unbelievable. And the federal prison is in Colorado where it's legal. It's insane. And so he's got some friends. He also spends a lot of time in this particular facility in the law library working on his case, and he's gotten to know other people in there doing that. And generally, he has not been singled out or, you know, harassed or anything. However, there's always the danger of a riot in a prison like this. It's full of violent gangs and violent people. It's where they put their most violent people as short of the supermax and where everybody's in solitary. And in a riot, you can be collateral damage. You can just be walking down the hall and, you know, be attacked. It's a whole other level. And I'm worried about it, frankly. It concerns me.
Gosh. So your life must be very different now from what it was 5 years. Look, I've got a lot of questions.
Sure.
And like when we spoke before we started recording, it is also personal to me because the Silk Road paved the way for other websites. And when my mother was sick with cancer, we wanted to buy her something that was illegal. So it is a personal story, and I've got a lot of questions, but I just want to go back to October 2013. Ross is arrested. Where you were in Costa Rica?
No, my husband and I were in Austin.
You were in Austin.
When we lived.
When were you first aware? What happened? Can you talk me through the day?
I was going out to run some errands, and I walked by my husband's office, and he was sitting there like this, you know, like with his head in his hands. I'm like, what happened? What's wrong? And he's like, Ross has been arrested. And I'm like, what? I mean, it was the last thing I expected to hear about Ross. And then suddenly I get on the phone. A Reuters reporter had called us. I'm not sure how they got our number, but in any case, she was very nice, and she filled us in on what was going on. I'm like, what? And then suddenly we're getting the phone's ringing off the hook. The emails are pouring in. Journalists are driving by our house. I turn on the TV, Ross. I'm like, this is insanity. I can't even believe it. It was like a huge wave came and it was just carrying us. And we've been trying to, you know, swim and surf it as much as possible since. It was a tsunami that just hit our family and hasn't really let up. I mean, you know, it goes through different phases, but it's always dominating our existence, mainly too, because we haven't given up. We're not going to give up and let Ross die in that place. It's just wrong. He's such a good person. He's not a threat to anyone. He's not a danger to anyone. And even even if, and I don't believe this, but even if everything they convicted him for is accurate, you don't give a double life sentence plus 40 years to someone where there's no violence involved, they're not a danger, they have no criminal record. It's just outrageous.
It must have been very strange because what he was arrested for wasn't a small crime. It was quite a big thing to get your head around. Were you even aware of the existence of the Silk Road as a website?
No. I've never was on it or heard about it or no.
So at the time, what was it, how often were you talking to Ross? What was your belief he was doing in life?
Well, he had gone on to, I don't know when, I don't know the time frame exactly, but he was developing a Bitcoin exchange. He was very interested in Bitcoin. He had told me about Bitcoin and how excited he was about it. And I actually asked him, should I get some? And he goes, no, Mom, it's too volatile. I'm like, that was not good advice.
That was not good advice.
Anyway.
It must have been a couple of dollars at that point.
Yeah, it was actually even less. I think it was less than $1. But anyway, I'm not sure exactly, but it was cheap, very cheap. But in any case, a friend of his had asked him to come out to California because he was doing a startup and he wanted Ross involved and they were friends. And he went out to get involved with that and other things.
And what was your personal opinion on your stance on drugs prior to this? Because I know you must have changed during the process because you've been exposed to a lot more information now.
I've definitely changed about the whole criminal justice system. I was not, my stand on drugs, I don't know. I actually knew people who were arrested and put in jail for marijuana with a mandatory minimum, which seemed to me unconstitutional. Seemed like it was up to a judge to decide these things. I didn't agree with putting people in prison for that. I didn't have a real strong, the drug war was not on my radar, frankly, that much. I just didn't think about it that much. My kids didn't have drug problems. It wasn't an issue that was foremost in my mind. I do totally understand the argument that we own our bodies, and I don't understand where the authority is in the U.S. government for making drugs illegal. When they made alcohol illegal, they had to pass an amendment to the Constitution and then another amendment to make it legal again, because of course prohibition never works. And they didn't do that with drugs. It's just sort of they decided. And that's what bothers me is the overreach and the persecution of people. But I didn't think about it that much. But I really want people, especially maybe conservative people who are against drugs, and so they're for the drug war, to have them understand. You can be against drugs, and I don't recommend drugs. I really don't. I think it's probably a bad idea. Don't do them, okay? But probably shouldn't smoke cigarettes either. Probably shouldn't drink too much. I know people who have killed themselves with alcohol, literally. So, but they decided to do that, and.
But it's a freedom of choice.
Yes, I do see it as a freedom of choice, and I don't feel like the government has the authority. Now, maybe they want to pass an amendment, and then maybe they have the authority, but they don't have the authority right now. And besides the fact that it doesn't work. The drug war has been going on for 45 years, more now, over $1 trillion of taxpayer money, and it hasn't stopped anyone from using drugs. So I point to people who, you don't have to be for drugs to be against the drug war. It's not really about drugs. It's about government expansion and money, because it feeds this mass incarceration in the United States. Most people, more than half, are in there for drug offenses.
Yeah. Did I read somewhere that the US has 25% of the world's prison population? Yep.
And 5% of the world's population. The biggest incarcerator in the world is our country, and it's a national disgrace. It's really against the principles of our country.
And probably a false economy.
Well, yes.
In that the trillion spent on the drug war could be spent on other things.
Yeah. Yeah, you think? Or maybe to bring down our debt a little bit. Yeah. I mean, if it were doing something that actually produced results, you could have an argument about it. But since it doesn't. And not to mention the money involved in incarcerating people for these excessive sentences. It's just, it's really, I'm shocked. I was shocked. I didn't really know about all of this before I was propelled into it. And the more I've seen, the more alarming it is about how we're losing our freedoms on so many fronts. But it's just right in your face at the prison.
So after Ross's arrest, when did you first get to talk to him?
He was able to call, we didn't find out till the day after he was arrested, and then he was able to call, I think, the next day, and he said, "I'm sorry to be a bother." I'm like, well, that's the understatement of the year. But anyway, he was able to call, and he was in San Francisco, I guess in a county jail or something. And ever since, anybody that has contact with Ross, including his public defender there, Brandon LeBlanc, was really a good guy. He's like, "Ross is a great guy. I've never had anyone so, easy and pleasant, and, he was calm. He deals with a lot of people who, he says he's a good soul," is how he put it. He said, "Ross, this shouldn't be happening to him." That was right in the beginning. And we've had guards and other staff at the prison come up to us and say the same thing. He shouldn't be in here. He doesn't belong in here. At least he should be in a lower security prison.
Do you believe he committed a crime?
I don't know what Ross did. You mean by creating the site?
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that was a crime?
I don't really feel like I am qualified to say. It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about creating a website that allowed people to sell illegal things, I guess that's a crime. I haven't seen the law.
I think what I'm getting at is...
Amazon did too.
Yeah, of course.
So Craigslist did too. So, is it a crime? I don't know the exact crime it would be.
See, I watched the Kim.com documentary on the flight over, and he's facing extradition, possible life sentence in prison.
Meanwhile, he's not an American.
I know.
And he's not in America.
Because he created...
But this happens all the time.
But he created a website where people can share files, and some of them shared movies. Google creates...
Life sentence for that?
I think potentially, yeah. I see Google created a website where you can find all kinds of illegal things. People
kill people on Facebook Live.
People share...
Google had jihadist activity on.
Yep.
Amazon, a woman is suing Amazon because her daughter bought cyanide on Amazon and killed herself with it.
And Twitter has jihadi groups spreading content. Child pornography has been found on Facebook.
Yeah, not on Silk Road, by the way.
Not on Silk Road. I think the point I was trying to get to is, do you believe Ross shouldn't be in prison at all, or do you believe Ross should have had a lighter sentence?
Actually, at this point, he's done almost 5 years. If you really are talking about correctional, I would bet my life that Ross could come out of there now and never break the law again. He's not a slow learner. He's a fast learner. And I believe that he could actually contribute to society. So if the Department of Corrections is indeed correctional and not punitive, I think it would be just fine to let Ross out now. I would question people who have violently hurt people. I mean, there's no victim came forward at trial to say Ross had harmed them.
It's clearly punitive.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, it's supposed to be correctional.
Yes.
So in that case, and so I would say, no, I think he should be let out. I would love to see him let out. But as far as a lighter sentence, I don't think that's even, how could you debate that? I mean, life sentences have quintupled in the U.S. criminal justice system since the 80s. Quintupled. When I was growing up, hardly anybody got life. You had to be a mass murderer to get life. It was a big deal to give someone a life sentence. And now they've quintupled. And there's 17,000 people serving life that are nonviolent like Ross. And you're talking about Kim.com. Life? I mean, there's no chance for redemption. There's no chance for restitution. And it's just outrageous. It's scary.
In researching this interview, I've read a lot and I've watched a lot. I've watched the documentaries, I've watched various interviews, and there seems to be divided opinion. There seems to be some people one side of the fence that sees Ross as a criminal mastermind who created the front for a drug empire. Then there seems to be the other side that see Ross as a hero who allowed people freedom of choice. And when researching that, I found that there were many people who saw the Silk Road as an opportunity to purchase their drugs in a non-violent environment and in a safe environment, and ensure that the purity of the drugs were higher and cleaner and therefore safe to take. And I think on a personal level, I veer to that side. It then goes back to the war on drugs not working. And actually, do you believe the Silk Road therefore served a purpose? And in hindsight, do you believe Ross would do the same again, knowing that it creates this debate? Has it been worth it?
He's already said he would never do it again. He wouldn't have done it just for what's happened to our family. He just wouldn't. In fact, somebody who was visiting him said, well, hey, if I'm ever in your seat, you help my mom. And he said, don't get in my seat. It's not worth it. It's like there's other ways that you can make the point. And, a lot of 26-year-olds, he was 26 when he got the idea, and he actually created a video game first. Okay. Based on free market principles and Austrian economics, and then turned to the internet. And the idea was not to sell drugs. It was to protect the anonymity and privacy of the users on the site. It was product agnostic, really. It was up to people what they decided to exchange using Bitcoin, because he saw the potential for monetary freedom with Bitcoin. And, there's a lot of legal or certainly non-drug items on there. And as you point out, there were things that were helping people, CBD oil for children with seizures or cancer or things like that.
Well, as I mentioned to you before, the Silk Road paved the way for the website where I bought the CBD oil for my mother's cancer.
And exactly. So the intention wasn't, I'm going to be a big drug kingpin and make a lot of money and sell drugs and have people, suffer. That is so not Ross. And he didn't even run this. He says, and I believe him. And there's a lot of indication, which we will be putting up on the website, that he didn't. But what did you ask me again? Because I really want to finish the thought. I'm sorry.
So what I was saying is that by creating the Silk Road,
would he do it again?
Yeah, he has opened the door for. Without the Silk Road, I might not have been able to purchase what I purchased for my mother. Right. Was the sacrifice worth it? Right.
He would say he would not do it again. He said it. And 26-year-olds are sometimes reckless. They're very passionate about things. They think they're immortal. They're reckless. They do stuff. He's matured a lot. He's 34 now. And he's learned a lot. He's learned a lot in prison. And from all the people he's met there, from the price he is paying, so I don't believe he would do it again. That's my opinion, because I don't think he would want to, first of all, give up his life, and secondly, hurt us. And but it doesn't mean you can't work towards freedom in a way that maybe wouldn't be such a extreme thing, a reckless thing, thinking can just do these things.
And if he was,
got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and if he was released, how do you think he would spend his time? Do you think he would do something completely different, or do you think this is an area he would focus on in a way that's within the legal framework?
Oh, he would definitely be within the legal framework. What he said to me the other day, he said, Mom, when I get out, we're going to lead a simple life. I think what he would do immediately is get in nature. He is such a nature person. He's been cooped up in a cage for, so long. But Ross still cares about freedom. I care about freedom. I think we're allowed to do that in this country. I don't think it means you're a bad person who should be put in jail. Although the judge in her sentencing said, we know you started this site for philosophical reasons, and I'm not sure you've given that up yet.
Was this Judge Forrest?
Yes, it was.
Catherine Forrest?
Catherine Forrest.
I struggle with Judge Catherine Forrest, and I believe she'd made her decision very early on in setting an example with Ross. There seems to be a very different example set with Ross than those who say set up the Silk Road too.
Yeah, who's out? You mean Blake Benthall, who never did any time?
Who essentially did the same thing.
Oh, they said it was bigger. The government said it is a quote unquote in their PR and in their complaint, it's identical site. Only it was 4 times the size of Silk Road and with more listings. And Blake Benthal was in custody for 13 days. He's gone. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing, but he served no time. And he knew what happened. It wasn't like some 26-year-old kid go, I got a great idea, and let's see, and it's away from you. He knew, and he's out. So I'm not saying I want him in jail.
We want the opposite, right? We want
exactly.
Ross to have similar, but hasn't a precedent then been set with Ross? The standards therefore seem to be different. Well,
I can go into why I think Ross got it so hard.
Please do. I think people need to hear this.
I don't think it is about drugs. The biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years. The biggest cocaine and heroin seller got 5. Biggest meth seller got 3. And Blake Benthal got none. Second in command at Silk Road 2 got 8. The corrupt agents who were stealing and were probably tampering with the evidence and content on the server got 6 and 7. I think it's about Bitcoin. I think it's about privacy on the internet and Tor, but about Bitcoin, because Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, was a ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee. And he's the one that called for the takedown of Silk Road and got law enforcement. And they talk about this in Deep Web. Was the impetus behind the whole thing. And I think, the NSA revelations recently about how the NSA was urgently pursuing Bitcoin users 6 months before Ross was arrested, around the time when Chuck Schumer, this whole thing, shows that the government was very concerned about Bitcoin. That's what they were worried about. This, hey, you don't mess with their money. And it's an alternate currency that was gaining traction. This cannot be tolerated. And I think that is really why. And so Schumer was very influential. Judge Catherine Forrest was recommended by Schumer to her position on the bench in the Southern District. Preet Bharara, who was the lead prosecutor, was Chuck Schumer's special counsel for many years. And Ross was arrested in California, but he was brought back to New York to be tried in Schumer's state. Mm-hmm. So I think, I do think he's a political prisoner. If you want to say that, his sentence was so disparate from the biggest drug seller got 10 years. Same criminal designation and all. I don't know the right word. Forget the word. But anyway, they rank them based on, what they've done. And, he got 10 years. Ross has already served almost 5.
So ideally, if he'd been given a similar sentence, he may be looking at release now for
good behavior.
Do you have a similar to UK? It's like half good behavior.
They don't get half here anymore.
Okay.
They used to get better, but they do get some. Yeah, They get a couple years.
So where are you now in the legal process?
Oh, and by the way, just let me say one more thing about the sentence. Judge Forrest, the mandatory minimum for what they said Ross was, like kingpin, they're calling a website host a kingpin, and as if he's Pablo Escobar, who, is supposedly responsible for 3,000 deaths and 300 assassinations, supposedly Ross's equivalent. But in any case, she could have given him 20 years.
Yeah, so mandatory 20 years.
That's the mandatory minimum.
Yeah, mandatory minimum.
And that's long. For a 30-year-old guy, that means your whole, young years, your really most vital years, you could argue, are taken. And then he's not going to get out after not being on the internet for 20 years and come out and do some revolutionary thing on the internet. I mean, come on. Who knows what's going to be happening in 20 years? But she didn't think that was long enough. For her, he's got to die there. He has to come out, be carried out as a corpse out of that place. That's when she'll be happy.
And to prove what point?
She thought she said it was going to deter others from doing it. And of course, there was a spike in darknet markets after the sentencing.
She's essentially using Ross to set an example. But it hasn't.
That's what she said, and that's what the prosecution said, and that's even what the appellate court said.
But like the war on drugs doesn't stop drug use.
Exactly.
The example hasn't stopped darknet markets.
No, or drug use, or anything. Yeah.
And they're actually worse drug.
Yes. Bigger.
Darknet.
Without the kind of restrictions Silk Road had, like I'm sure you can get child porn and all. I mean, I don't know, but I don't go on them. But things that create victims that Silk Road didn't allow.
So where are you now in the legal process?
Well, our legal team, Ross has a legal team that is one of the top in the country, Williams and Connolly. And they took the case because they think it's a very important case. Mm-hmm. And they really like Ross. Ross has worked with them on the case. And they're great people and very brilliant. And they've written what's called a petition of certiorari, which is called, it's a cert petition for short, which is basically presenting broad-reaching questions. Once it gets to the Supreme Court, they don't get into the nuts and bolts of the trial or violations at trial, but they talk about more broad-reaching issues. And so they've presented 2 questions. And this petition's been joined by 21 groups from both sides of the political spectrum in 5 amicus briefs, friends of the court, mm-hmm. which are documents just saying, this is important for these reasons, and you need to hear it to the court.
That is the National Lawyers Guild, American Black Cross, Reason Foundation, Drug Policy Alliance, and Downsize DC Foundation.
Well, and Cato Institute. There's several. There's several. If you go in, they joined it, so it's several people on each one. It's not just those. There's 21 of them.
And the Drug Policy Alliance have been very supportive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They wrote an amicus brief for Ross's appeal at the Second Circuit level too.
Okay, so what's going to happen now? Because it seems.
Then what happened was the government, the Solicitor General of the United States, actually answered the petition. He responded, and then Ross's team replied to that, and now everything's been presented to the court, and we wait. Now, I can tell you the 2 questions because I'll give you a quick synopsis of what they're addressing, mm-hmm. because they're very important. One is the question, does it violate the 4th Amendment for the U.S. government to seize an individual's internet traffic information without a warrant or probable cause, which means a good reason that they present to the court? And the petition is saying no. And it has huge implications because of all the relevant and personal information that is can be gleaned from one's internet habits, political affiliations, religious affiliations, sexual orientation, all kinds of medical information, all kinds of things, apps you use. What are you interested in? And the thing is, some people go, this privacy question. So, I don't have anything to hide. It's fine. Well, that's good, but it doesn't mean they can't use that information to blackmail officials, judges, persecute people if they want to go after. It's a huge slippery slope. And they should at least get a warrant. I mean, if they went into your house and took a file cabinet without a warrant, it would be clearly unconstitutional, no question. But because it's digital, it falls under this doctrine called the third-party doctrine, which has been used now for 4 decades, based on the dial telephone and the privacy of numbers being dialed. That's it. And they're saying, well, we can do this. And I'm kind of like, well, then why have warrants? You'll find more in my laptop than you're going to find in my house, really, at this point. Right. And so that's one question, and it's a big deal for privacy in the digital age, because the 4th Amendment's becoming shredded, basically. It's losing any kind of meaning now. The other question is, does it violate the 6th Amendment and the right to a jury trial to have a judge, and one judge, and not 12 members of a jury, decide and rule if something's true? And this judge, Judge Forrest, she did this on several, with a few issues, but the most glaring is murder for hire, never brought to court. The government never brought this to court, never mm-hmm. prosecuted it, never proved it, never had the jury rule on it. But Judge Forrest just decided, yes, it's true. And this is a very dangerous thing also. The reason we have the 6th Amendment, one of the reasons, is to protect the accused from this kind of overreach of power of a judge. And it's a pillar of our justice system. And it's actually apparently quite widespread, and I didn't know that. So
to help us understand, not everyone's based in the US.
Yeah,
a right to a jury trial. Does anybody have that right in any case?
Yes.
to request it.
Most people don't go because 98% of people plead because they're bullied and threatened by prosecutors that if they go to trial, they're going to lose and they'll get a worse sentence. So it's becoming very rare that people even go to trial.
Ross was offered a plea?
He was offered a threat. He wasn't really offered a plea.
Right. Aren't most pleas threats?
Yeah, but he was offered by Saren Turner, the prosecutor. He said, we're going to charge you with narcotics trafficking. It has a 10-year mandatory minimum. We're going to recommend a life sentence. But if you don't plea, then we're going to charge you with kingpin charge. They weren't going to originally charge him with the kingpin charge. It was part of a threat. Which just goes to show they don't really think he's a kingpin. But anyway, it's just a threat. Okay. And then that has a 20-year mandatory minimum. But we're still going to recommend life. So it's kind of like, what kind of deal is that?
Was this related to him releasing the details of users and sellers on the site, which he refused to do?
I don't know that it ever came to that. I'm not really clear on whether they said if you release names, you can get out. I think it was more if you confess to this, we're still going to recommend life, but you, instead of 20, it's kingpin charge.
Right. Mm-hmm. So did Ross want a jury trial? Well,
with that kind of deal, yes. Okay. I think potentially he would have been advised otherwise if there was a ceiling, like, okay, you face the 10-year mandatory minimum. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine he would take that, but he didn't really have much. I mean, it's still giving the judge the power to give him life, which she did, and you don't have a chance to appeal it. Does
life always mean whole life? Like in the UK, we have life, which I think is 25 years, and then whole life, which is the two separate.
Right. In the state system, no.
Okay.
But the federal system changed that and took away parole in the 80s.
Right.
And so life does mean actual life, that you die in prison. You have no option, which is outrageous. It's like, really? Yeah, and that's one reason we're spending a fortune on this mass incarceration, which, of course, is a huge industry. Mm-hmm. Lots of people are benefiting from it. And it's really a jobs program. It's so many things. Keeping old people in there that are dying, and they won't let them out. And there's a 90-year-old guy in there asking, can I come out now? Okay, he's 90. Nope. And it's a drug crime.
Yeah, so we're jumping around, but there's some really interesting things here. So you say it's a jobs program?
Yes, it employs a lot of people.
At low rate to produce?
Well, I mean jobs for the guards. Well, one of the biggest lobbyists against legalization is prison guard unions.
Right.
They don't want marijuana legal. Low-hanging fruit comes in, keeps the place stocked. The inventory is stocked. Police unions, also one of the biggest lobbyists. I mean, the town where I live and the surrounding towns would be absolutely either deserted or totally depressed if it weren't for the prisons. It's a very big prison area. And it employs, it's millions, probably billions of dollars, this whole kind of thing.
Right. Gosh, but huge. It does feel like a false economy. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's fueled by taxpayer money.
Yes, of course.
And it's fueled by human lives. It's really human trafficking, I think. I mean, it's like if you make money off of human lives and you're doing this, how is it not human trafficking? That's what human traffickers do.
I understand the whole life term for specific violent criminals who maybe can't change their ways and are a danger on the streets. Ross is clearly not a danger to anyone.
Hardly.
So have they given you any reason why they wanted life?
Well, Catherine Forrest just said, I'm going to give you the harshest sentence I possibly can. She would have given him the death penalty, but you can't. Well, that must have frustrated her. But anyway, she did give him a death sentence, really, because like the ACLU calls it a walking death sentence. And Ross even said to me, he goes, Mom, it's a death sentence. It just takes longer. And I
got it here as one of my first notes, a death sentence in disguise. Was that it? Who said that? Was that the Pope?
I think the Pope did say that.
Yeah.
And it is. And I mean, like I said, there's 17,000 nonviolent people, so it just takes them. Now, I do think potentially even violent people, depending on, like you say, if they're a danger. But people do change and mature. Now, you don't want to let people out that are obviously a danger to people. But there's clearly many, many who are not. And then if you add in virtual life, which is such a long sentence, they'll die in there, 50 years or more. you're talking about over 200,000 people.
What a waste.
Horrible waste of human lives, of money, of everything. And it's evil. It's awful. It's this is the land of the free.
But it's not just one life. It's yours. It's Kirk,
true.
Your husband.
You're right. His
your
sister.
daughter.
Mm-hmm.
It's
We have extended family that are affected. You're absolutely right. When your loved one is doing time, you're doing time. Absolutely.
So,
and I get to know the families in the prisons. It's not just us. I get to know the children. I see them crying and suffering, and they're wounded children who are clinging to their dads who have to leave, and the families trying to hold it together because of this situation. And I hear the stories, and these kids are statistically more likely to go into prison themselves.
Yep.
So that keeps that inventory flowing. That just keeps that thing moving on.
So you've got these 2 points on the Fourth and the Sixth Amendment. Going to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Well, we hope. It depends if they'll take it, but we hope they'll take it.
So did I read they have to reply, was it by the 18th of March or February?
No, you might have been reading about the government had to reply.
This is separate.
They did reply. That's the basically the Solicitor General. That's the prosecutors, the ones bringing the charges. And then our team had to reply by, I think it was the 21st of March.
Yes.
So they did. That's all published. And the Supreme Court, I'm not sure if they don't really have a deadline. It could be April, it could be June, it could be, and it's being linked to another Fourth Amendment case called Carpenter v. U.S., which is about a cell phone tracking. Although it's really more invasive. Your internet browsing is more informative than where you are with your cell phone. I mean, really is, but more personal. But the government suggested that Ross's case be held to wait to see how they rule on Carpenter. And there's another case, Kyra versus U.S., it's probably being held to wait for Carpenter.
So if rejected by the Supreme Court, is that the end of the legal process?
There are a few other very difficult things you can try for. It's
like a pardon or...
Well, that would be great. That would be wonderful. And I am asking anybody who has political connections, please reach out to me. And also, if anybody knows anyone in the NSA who might have proof that the NSA was actually specifically tracking Silk Road, because that calls into the legality of the investigation. Or political connections that, and does anyone that has some power in politics in the United States or elsewhere even could help us.
And if the Supreme Court does take it on, I'm assuming you've done research into similar things the Supreme Court have taken on before.
Yes.
What's the process and how long does it take? And what are you looking to getting yourself into with this? How long?
If they take it,
yes.
Or if they don't take it?
If they do take it.
If they do take it. Well, there's different things that can happen. It depends how they rule. They could rule broadly on Carpenter and saying, hey, you got to get a warrant for this. This is not right. And then it would be what's called remanded or sent back to the appellate court with guidance. So the appellate court's getting guidance from the Supreme Court about now how to apply it. Because they brought it up, but they said, we can't do anything with this. The Supreme Court's got to tell us what to do. Okay. That could lead to a new trial, which would be great. I'd like to have a new trial where we can actually talk about the corruption. We could actually talk about a lot of things that were never allowed. Many, many things were suppressed. The jury had no idea that 2 corrupt agents, now in prison, by the way, were all over that site. Not only stealing, but they had the ability to change. They had the ability to act as a Dread Pirate Roberts, the persona that, was running the site. Since the trial, it's been uncovered that there was another law enforcement agent who went in and deleted evidence. There's proof that there was evidence, and then there's comparatively what was shown to the jury in evidence. There's a whole big section deleted. That's very important. So someone went in there, and there's proof that Dread Pirate Roberts logged in to the Silk Road 7 weeks after Ross was arrested. He was in solitary. There's no way it was Ross. Who was that?
Gosh, you know what? I have a question on solitary as well, and prison life. But that was one of the key things when, there's a lot of evidence to sift through. There is a lot to get your head around. There's a lot of inconsistencies. There's a lot of troubling things. Mm-hmm. But the fact that someone logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts 7 weeks after said to me one of two things. Well, one of three things. Either Ross wasn't Dread Pirate Roberts, either there were multiple Dread Pirate Roberts, either there was a government agency acting as Dread Pirate Roberts. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't this... Did this information come out after conviction? Right.
What happens is, and what the government apparently routinely does, they'll have evidence called 3500 material. They had it for a year. Right before the trial, they dumped, I believe it was around 4 terabytes of material.
Was this a thing I read, like 6 million pages or something?
Yeah,
ridiculous?
Well, it's 1.2 billion pages if you type it. And hey, here's our evidence. We gave it to you.
How long
and then
in advance did they
I think it might have been, maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was less. It wasn't long.
2 weeks to get through 1.2 billion pages.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And apparently this is routine. This is how our government operates. These kind of things, I was like, really? This is the stuff that's opened my eyes. I'm like, this is wrong. But anyway, the defense kept going through it after trial, sifting. And that's when it was uncovered that this other, and it's proof, and it was written in several publications. It's right there.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I went through everything on the website, and I've listed about 7 or 8 things I struggle with.
Okay.
On both sides of the argument. And
I
just want to talk through each of them
okay.
With you. So one we've already talked about. I said within the legal framework, Ross has committed a crime. Mm-hmm. So I have never... Again, I see Ross as doing something that was good for me and my family. Mm-hmm. But I see within the legal framework he has committed a crime. That is something I can't get away from. One thing I struggled with in the evidence is, and again, correct me if I've missed something wrong here, but when Ross was arrested, he was logged into the website as the master admin, which says to me he was involved in the site up until the time of his arrest.
He was actually downloading the Colbert Report in the library. That's in the transcripts. Okay. But he was... messaged by an agent who was posing as Cirrus, which was one of the admins, to log on, and he did.
So potential setup.
Yeah, okay. And there'll be more information about that on the website when it's all pulled together. Not that nothing's proven, but there's a lot of interesting information that make one think, there's a lot more to this than. But that's what he said. Okay.
One thing we've talked about. So one of the things he was charged with was drug trafficking. Was the drug trafficking charge related to the mushrooms, or was it related to the operations of the website?
Oh, I think it was the operations of the website. So initially it was, it was on the internet. They said trafficking on the internet.
So this is something I struggle with, seeing him as a drug trafficker, because therefore I see the... owners of Google as guilty of piracy with YouTube. I therefore see the owners of Facebook as guilty of supporting child pornography, as child pornography has been found on Facebook, and therefore I see the operators of Twitter as guilty of supporting terrorism, as there is terrorist activity on that. So I struggle with that one.
Well, yeah, it's very hypocritical.
Yeah, very... Very hypocritical.
I mean, Jeff Bezos isn't being dragged into court for selling cyanide or whatever, or Craig Newmark or for Craigslist. People, and I'm not saying they should. I don't think they should. And there was actually a state case in California, Backpage, where a judge said it's a freedom of speech issue, and the owners of Backpage, who were sex trafficking, are not responsible for the traffickers on their site. They were enabling child sex trafficking. And they got out based on the same theory you're talking about, which is their website posts. They're not doing it.
I guess the way other people would see it differently is that Amazon is a bookstore / anything now. Yeah, right. YouTube is trying to take down pirated material. the Silk Road was primarily a place to buy drugs openly and freely. I think that's maybe the difference.
Okay, I get that, except it was user driven.
Of course.
And the anonymity did attract that. But yeah, I mean,
I see it was an open shop, therefore, okay.
Almost open, yeah.
Yeah. I struggle with everything I've read.
The back page was child sex trafficking.
Of course, yeah.
And so anyway, in my mind, that's a lot worse.
Of course.
Like beyond worse.
Yes.
I'm not saying, right. So.
From everything I've read about Ross and understand about him, I struggle to see somebody who would hire for murder.
Yeah, and so does everybody who knows him.
Including
the alleged victim, by the way. I assume you saw Curtis Green's tweet.
I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Where did this come from then?
Well, I have my own theories,
I'd love to hear them.
When I read the chat that the prosecutor was permitted to read to the jury, he said to the jury, he hasn't been charged with this. You're not expected to rule on it. There were no murders, but let me just show you this chat. This chat was the most contrived. It was, to me, very obvious that from my point of view, one person had written it perfectly punctuated. When Ross ever wrote me, there was not a capital letter in sight, okay? He's like, da-da-da-da. This chat was like perfect punctuation, capitalization. Didn't sound like him at all. And I'm like, there's no way that was Ross. And I'm like, really? And then the agent who presented the evidence, he's the one in prison. He's the one that was stealing and changing things. And basically, why should we take his word that this is valid evidence at all?
So,
now, other people think it was other things, but
the agent could have created this to divert attention away from the site.
Yeah,
make this potentially a murder trial or a soliciting murder trial, and therefore divert attention away from the theft.
Good.
He was making.
The motivation would be there. The government. I've talked to other people who said the government did that to me too. They smeared me with murder and murder for hire. It never happened. But it's funny, they never charged him for it. They dropped those charges.
Mm-hmm.
And
but yet consider them.
Okay.
But consider them as part of the sentencing.
They just talked about them, yeah. And then, the judge did, yeah. And that's the argument. And look, you don't get to drop charges, not ask a jury to rule on them, and then use them to put someone in a cage for life. Excuse me?
Yeah.
Our founding fathers saw the danger of this. That's why they wrote the Sixth Amendment.
The last one had on my list.
And no one died, okay?
No one died.
So even if someone does murder for hire, if there's no victim, it's a 10-year sentence.
So another thing I've read.
I don't believe for a second Ross did that. So, yeah.
So I have read letters from family of people who have attributed the deaths of their children to drugs they bought from the Silk Road. Now, I'm not using this as an attack on Ross, but there are people who don't see this as a victimless situation.
Right.
Do you have opinions on this? Because it's an emotive subject.
Oh, it's awful. I of course, I feel horrible and so sad for anyone who's lost a child in any way, including, of course, drug use. I would hate to think, look, it's a terrible thing. The reason they call it victimless is because there was no force. I'm not proving it. I'm not defending Silk Road. I'm not defending drugs. Let me just get really clear about that. However, I don't think it's the same as taking a needle and plunging it into somebody's arm and pushing the plunger and murdering them. It's not the same. It's not good. For anyone to use drugs or alcohol, for that matter. I feel bad for people I know whose child has been killed by a drunk driver too. It's like horrible, terrible. I don't think it has a place in the sentencing. It wasn't proven that it was from Silk Road. Actually, we hired a pathologist who said there's no way you can prove that this was even drugs in 2 of the cases, and that it was from Silk Road at all. There's no proof. And you're just saying this at a sentencing. to create a circus almost of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is,
and Ross did actually promote safe drug use on the website and create
well,
content.
whoever was running it did, yeah.
Apologies, yes.
Yeah.
Whoever was running it.
At the time. And yes, absolutely. That was brought up. The court doesn't care about that, really. That wasn't a good argument, I suppose, in their mind, but it did. And I've had people write me and say it did. Yeah, so it wasn't proven. It was brought up in sentencing. And of course, it's horrible. It's horrible to lose a child. And I'm completely, sympathetic. It's awful. But that's where the victimless thing is that it wasn't forced. Nothing was forced. It's not forced when you buy drugs on the street either. It's your choice. I don't think it's a good choice. Bad choice.
Do you feel in some ways you've lost a child?
Yes, I do. Absolutely do. I do. It's different. He's alive, and there's hope because he's alive. But he would have probably gone on to have a family, and at this point even, and be part of our family. And yes, I do. He's still Ross. He's still there. I get to see him. So it is different. I once a child dies, it's like there's no.
Of course, yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, I do.
You get to
and it never ends. I can't. There's no closure because as long as Ross is in there, I can't go on and go. Oh well, I'm going to have my life now. I'm going to go travel, or I'm going to go do this hobby, or I can't do that.
So what was your life before the arrest, and what is it now? What can you just give us a picture of what is a picture of your life now, how it's changed?
Yeah, well, my husband and I have a business in Costa Rica. He built bamboo houses in the rainforest off grid, and we rent them out as vacation rental. So we were living down there part time, pretty tranquil, and so that was our business. It still is. Now he's taken that over completely because I was helping with that. And now he's taken that over completely to support us. And I completely and full time dedicate myself to various issues in Ross's case. And not only Ross, it's become kind of bigger.
I was going to say, it seems like you've become a spokesperson for wider issues relating to things that do relate to Ross's case. But
right. And Ross and I both hope that his case can shine a spotlight on some of these issues. And since I can talk firsthand, at least about some of it, certainly about the prisons, there's privacy, there's crypto, there's the currency, there's the whole criminal justice system. It's kind of converged all on this case. And I see it as a bigger fight, really, I do. I'm concerned about us losing our freedoms and the way the government's going in this country.
So if I was to put a situation to you, say Ross had a successful appeal with the Supreme Court and was released. Say there was significant changes to some parts of the law, something to do with the prison system, something that meant something. Would this then have all been worth it?
That's a really big question. It depends when he gets released.
I guess I can only ask for you, not for Ross. For me.
At this amount of time, it may be if we really got a good result for others as well. Ross told me, he said, look, it's not like it. He said, depending on how long this goes on, it hasn't been a complete waste. I've learned things I never would have learned. I've met people I never would have met. My eyes have been opened to things I never would have known. And he said, it has, and that made me feel so much better because he's making the best of it, and he's trying to be a good influence. He's trying to. So he said it has, and he's matured tremendously. So even though it's been horribly hard. Maybe. I'd have to say maybe. Okay. But, I've met so many amazing people who have stepped up beside us, who I really admire, that have inspired me. I've had experiences I never would have. I've learned things I never would have. So if it weren't for Ross being in prison, it's been one of the most challenging and enriching 4 years of my entire life. So I don't know, I'd say up to this point, maybe so, especially if we could get some kind of attention to what's going on in the criminal justice system and the drug war.
And so your husband, Kirk, is based in
Well, he goes back
He
and
goes
forth.
back and forth.
Yeah.
And you're based in...
Well, I'm Colorado, so I can be near Ross. But they move people around in the system. I don't know how long I'll be there.
Okay, so I think I want to ask some stuff about the prison system.
Sure.
So, but does this mean that naturally you and Kirk have less time together? As,
Yeah, we do.
Which must be...
Yeah, it's okay. We manage it.
And you've become a figure for this, but I did read Kirk's letter as well. Mm-hmm. How's his relationship with Ross? Is he going to spend regular time with him?
Yeah, well, he's going to see him soon, actually. He's coming today,
okay.
actually, to help me out with some things.
He's coming to Austin?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is. His mother lives here as well.
Okay.
And he will, see Ross, and they have a very good relationship, and, they communicate regularly and everything, yeah.
So in terms of the prison system, and in terms of Ross's experience there, you'd say, and I've heard you talk about this before, they move people around regularly, and this is a big country.
It is.
In the UK, you could move somebody from one end to the other. It's a 5-6 hour drive. Mm-hmm. You can do it one end of the country. Here, it's a 5-6 hour flight.
Yeah.
What is the reason they move people around so much?
I've learned in the prison system, I use this term, why ask why? Because there's so many things that go, why? Why? And I'm like, there's no rational reason that I can see. However, it might be because they have more beds to fill here. It's like the prisoners are not people. They're units, And actually, Ross said one time he was referred to as freight. And he said to the guy, I'm freight. He goes, freight coming up, the elevator or whatever. So they're not really, they don't consider the people or the families as far as I can see.
So it's a machine and then they're cogs
in the machine. It's a
bureaucracy.
It's a heartless bureaucracy. It's probably one of the most worst examples of what bureaucracies can become as far as I can tell, because they have ultimate power. And so as far, and it's the team that decides where you go, it's called, if you can believe it, the hotel team. I'm like,
it's just ludicrous.
It is. It's like the most evil and expensive hotel ever. But the hotel team decides where you go. And it might have to do with, I don't know. It might have to do with how many beds need to be filled here or there or whatever. It might have to do with they don't want someone in there too long. Or I really don't know the reasoning. But you never know. I've talked to families who are like, how am I going to move? I've got kids in school. I've got a house. And then my husband's going to be so far away, or they're for dad, that kind of thing. And there's a visiting room. The visiting room's huge. It can seat 250 people.
Okay.
Usually there's about 3 to 5 inmates with visitors in there. It's vast. We're all sitting in this big empty room.
Why is that?
Because the people, I think a lot of it, they live so far away. They can't
Right.
afford it. They can't. And sometimes people show up and it's on lockdown or something, and they can't. There's so much heartbreak just in the day-to-day dealing with the situation. It's just amazing.
Gosh. And so has Ross now become used to prison? Does he have a life and a routine in there that he keeps to that?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't, I don't know if he's used to it. I mean, he's definitely coping with it very well. He's very strong. He's very strong mentally and emotionally, and I'm very happy to see that. And he's intentionally positive. He never complains to me, ever. He never complains. He, on a normal day, if they're not on lockdown, which has been way too frequent and almost nonstop since Thanksgiving, he goes outside. At this facility, unlike New York, he's got access to a big yard. He can see the mountains. He can watch the sunrise. He can run a track. So he's one of few people. A few of them go out and watch the sunrise every day. They can. And then he'll also spend a lot of time in the law library. He meditates.
The law library because of his case or just a wider interest?
No, his case. But he has learned a lot from others, and they talk and learn from each other. But, he's researching his case. And he actually worked with the lawyers somewhat on his case and made good arguments that, they accepted. So it's pretty good. But, he's learning. He's taking initiative. And he doesn't watch TV, which most prisoners, many of them, just veg in front of the TV 24/7.
He doesn't watch any?
Nope.
Does he have access to the outside world?
He feels like it's a waste of time. He wants to he's reading about artificial intelligence, and he's making the most of his time.
Really?
Yeah.
So
he's a scientist, really. He's not a computer programmer. He's a scientist.
My last interview with Morgan, I told you he was arrested for selling Bitcoin. Yeah. A lot of that discussion, we discussed about AI, actually. It was a really interesting
Same
debate.
kind of mentality, I guess.
You know what?
Yeah.
I think those people who have discovered Bitcoin and discovered kind of more, who are interested in technology, all converge on the same topics.
Mm-hmm. They're left brain, unlike myself. I'm like, but anyway.
Well, now you're open.
It.
Now you're open to this, and you've exposed to it. Maybe you're. So, how has Ross changed?
The thing about Ross is he hasn't changed, and I'm so happy. And that's one of the reasons I want to make sure he gets visits all the time, as much as possible, because he needs that lifeline. Because I think people do change after a while. We laugh, we have fun talking. He's sweet. He's not bitter. In fact, when I start getting kind of, saying things that, I'm not real, happy about some of the things that's happened or some of the people involved, he's like, don't even go there. It's not, we don't want to get into that. We want to just move forward, and it's okay. It's just all part of this whole fight. And, he's so inspiring to me, keeps me from going down that road. It's very easy to go down that road.
Yeah.
And he's not like that. He's not vindictive or anything like that. He's like, nah. And that's why, the people in there love him. He's like, they say, he's a good guy. He shouldn't be in here. You kind of take me aside. Because he is.
Very positive energy.
He really does.
Yeah. And
he cares about people. He's very sweet. And so this image in the media of this thug kingpin, it's like, it's absurd. But they, a lot of the media, not all, love that sensationalistic stuff.
Well, he was
clickbait.
Clickbait, and he was tried by media.
He sure was.
He was guilty before. He was convicted in many people's eyes.
Oh yeah.
That didn't help him.
Nope. No, the media and the government work very well together, as far as I can tell.
So you must now be very suspicious of the government. The different agencies within the government, their motivations. Mm-hmm. Does that make you feel any less American in any way?
Well, what I have really learned is the urge. I do believe that the urge for freedom is innate, somewhat. Maybe not in everyone, but I think it is. There's this thing in people like, I want to live my life. I want to make my own choices. I want to live my life. And I'm finding that is international. It's all over. I get people from all over the world contacting me, and Ross does too. It's resonated all over the world. I think that for me, I was a pretty patriotic person. I was, American ideals, and I've been very disillusioned. I feel like our country is being hijacked by people who don't have those ideals and don't believe in the principles that this country was founded on, but I do still love those principles. But I don't think they're American, but they're universal. And so that's how I see it. And I kind of see it like we need to defend them. And the thing is, you're not American, mm-hmm. but as somebody in Germany said, when the United States sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. We influence everybody, and for better or worse. And so it's important to everyone.
Well, this is about my 40th trip here. I come to America all the time. I do love it here. Travel all over, meet people.
Great people. Americans are great people, and for the most part, they really are.
They get a bad rep internationally.
Because of their government.
Because of the government. Mm-hmm. And what my experience is, I think also the over-exuberance at sport sometimes.
Oh, I'm not involved in that. So.
But what I find is the people here are very different from how the government represents them.
Definitely are. Yeah, I think so too.
So
definitely.
I kind of see Ross very much along the lines of how I see Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, people who have fought for freedom, fought for privacy, fought for rights. Yet he's the one in prison.
Yeah. Well, Julian, they're all both have their own restrictions, but they're not in prison.
But they have their own separate prisons. Mm-hmm. Julian Assange is stuck in an embassy in the UK. Edward Snowden would like to come back, I believe, but wants a fair trial.
I think Ross would probably trade with either one of them as far as venue.
Of course. Have they Have they been in contact with you? Have they been
No,
supportive?
Snowden did actually. He was interviewed at Liberty Forum 2 years ago, and actually the clip of the video is on our website, where Nick Gillespie of Reason asked him, he said, can we assume that the NSA was involved in the investigation of Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road? And he went, yeah. And he just said yes. And then he said, it's unthinkable they weren't. And he said some other stuff, but basically that's the bottom line. And now it's just come out from his memos that were top secret that, and I assume he knew this, that the NSA was specifically tracking Bitcoin users. Well, in 2013, where were the Bitcoin users? I think they were on Silk Road, a lot of them. I think that probably they were tracking Silk Road. And of course, the government denied it in the motions where Ross's defense said, look, the NSA, how'd you get the server? This isn't making sense. They said under oath how they got the server, and experts worldwide went, that doesn't make any sense. You're lying. And even Robert Graham said, we think the NSA did it. Well, the government didn't actually deny it. They said, they just mocked the defense and went, oh, boogeyman, you're just bringing up a boogeyman, the NSA, oh. I'm like, well, were they or not? But they never said. And now it's come out that they were tracking Bitcoin users. They weren't worried about drugs. They were worried about Bitcoin.
So the NSA probably know we're having this conversation right now then.
Oh, well, yeah.
Am I going to be banned from coming back to America now?
I don't hope not.
I hope not.
I don't know.
I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah, I know.
It's fascinating, some of this. If it wasn't so heartbreaking, it really is fascinating as well. Just a couple of more questions, because I'm conscious of time. I've got a couple more questions for you. Sure, how are you financing this? This must be very expensive.
Yeah. Well, we were pretty much depleted personally, but we've gotten a lot of really great support, grassroots support.
Good.
And from the crypto community, as well as just lots of different people. And that's how. And we had a fundraiser called the Free Rossathon. It's like a telethon, but it was a free Rossathon on the internet. It was an 8-hour online conference where 35 leaders in crypto and liberty movements and other in criminal justice reform came forward to speak on Ross's behalf and on these principles and what we've discussed a lot today. Mm-hmm. And we raised, we raised about $28,000, and then Roger Ver matched it.
Right.
No, not 20. We ended up with 40, whatever the math, 24,000, whatever. And that has enabled us, that and Roger's previous support. He's supported us very,
it's very cool,
really
Roger.
helpful. It is. But there's also been other people who have, either anonymous because it was Bitcoin, or people who stepped up, but small people too. I mean, even a price of a cup of coffee. Buy Ross a cup of coffee. Give it to this defense fund. It adds up when enough people care. So we have been able, with our own money and then with raising money, to fund it, and negotiated things with different people who are helping, and stuff like that.
So this fundraising is something that's continually going on.
Yeah, freeross.org.
So please do tell.
Yeah, thanks.
Say how people can help.
Freeross.org has lots of ways, and there's different ways to contribute financially, including just buy on Amazon through our site, and it doesn't cost you anything, but we get a little bit. And there's other things on there. There's an art game based on Ross's art that you can, for $1, you can play, and we get, it adds up. There's a tax deductible option. There's just flat out crypto, lots of different coins. Also, just PayPal. But also, people have skills. I'm not super tech or anything. I've had to learn all this, and I don't know a lot. And, people have different skills. If they want to offer to help, that'd be great. All our labor, is me and then a lot of people volunteering their time.
Anything specifically you're looking for right now?
Also the political connections and NSA, anybody in the government or that would have access to knowing any kind of documentation that the NSA was actually tracking Silk Road would be super helpful. I know that's pretty esoteric, but political connections and I don't know. It's just very tech ability, video editing ability, social media ability, and even just liking us and sharing and on social media and that kind of thing helps us too. You're helping us by having me on. It's spreading the word and seeing the bigger picture. It's a bigger picture.
Well, you're helping me too.
Good.
I really appreciate your time. Is there anything I've not covered today that you would want, any questions I've not asked that you wish I had have asked? Because I feel this is such an important subject.
Oh, that's nice. I always try to tell people we're at a tipping point in history. And I know there's a lot of sensationalism and stuff around this case, and it's kind of like, some of it, some people feel. But it's really not about Ross, and it's really not about a website. It's become much bigger. And I've gotten to see that we're at a tipping point in history. Which way are we going to go? We're in the digital age, and they're trying to apply 20th century law to the 21st century. And in the process, they're shredding our constitutional protections, and they, meaning the United States government. And this is very alarming.
Has it got worse under the current government? Is there any difference?
It was bad it's been bad. I think I don't know that it's gotten worse. I think that it's just, and I don't even know that it has to do with who's president.
Right.
I think that it's something that, the NSA, for example, they've been around a long time. They're entrenched.
Yeah.
There's a lot of entrenched bureaucracy that's, it's just there, but I do think the whole criminal justice system and the prosecutorial system is pretty much out of control. And that's been under, as far as I know, the previous administration. This administration is ramping up the rhetoric for sure. Death penalty for
I've seen it for drugs.
More violence in this thing. It's
like what's happening in the Philippines.
And it doesn't work. Yeah, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It'll just make it more violent. It's just crazy. But I think, we have to decide just with privacy and freedom in general, are we going to go, there's so much innovation that can happen. There's so much that can happen for good. Are we going to take that road or more government intrusion and control? Because I really think that the government wants to control the internet as well. And, privacy on the internet. The prosecution said in their motion, anyone who uses Tor has criminal intent. They said that or something along, basically that was the gist. I'm like, dissidents use Tor.
Journalists
in
Iran use Tor.
Lots of people
Journalists
use
in
Tor.
Syria use Tor. Lots of people use Tor.
Tor.
But
even though they invented
Tor, right?
Yeah, so,
this is the ironic
thing. And some people
thing.
said they're controlling it now. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to say, but they didn't openly, they said that. I was just like, whoa.
This is why it's kind of interesting in the crossover with, I said to you, I'm not really going, like my podcast is about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but this is an important story in the history of Bitcoin, but the interview isn't about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But it seems to be almost we're at a time now where the growth of cryptocurrency seems to be relevant and related to what is happening with privacy, with NSA, with Snowden, with Assange, with everything.
Well, now we know the NSA was tracking Bitcoin users.
Yes.
So that certainly ties it in.
Freedom of money at a time where rampant national debt. We've got changes to internet laws. Everything seems to be converging at once, and it's
accelerating. It seems like.
Do you have hope?
I do. I have hope for Ross. I have hope. I'm worried. I won't deny that, and I don't even know if I would say I'm optimistic, although I want to be. But I think there's always hope, and I do feel like the spirit of freedom is within people, and that. I have hope. Yes, I do.
It seems, again...
I don't think it's hopeless. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm afraid we're sliding down a very slippery slope to it.
Yeah, and it seems... I'm not sure on the word to use, but Ross created something originally which was about freedom.
Yeah.
And has had his freedom taken away.
Yes.
It seems a very interesting kind of battle line that's being drawn between those who want to take freedom away and those who want to give it.
I think that's what it boils down to, actually. People who want to be free and left alone and people who want to control people. I'm kind of seeing the world dividing up that way.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, so what's coming up then? What's going to be happening over the next kind of few weeks, months? What should we be looking out for? What should everyone be watching out for?
Well, the Supreme Court will decide if they take the case, and that's huge.
Okay.
So... I also, I'm going to be doing other preliminary things. I'm not stopping. I'm going to, be seeing what other avenues or things can be done to help Ross and to work with groups that are working towards reform and, pooling our resources there. Because I don't just, it's not just about Ross. Again, it's a bigger thing. Mm-hmm. So I have connected with people and I want to keep that going and see if we can come together to make some difference. And
how can people get in touch and who do you want to hear from? I don't want people to pester you, but...
No. I don't ever feel that way. FreeRoss.org has a contact. On the Take Action page, there's a contact. There's also an address you can write Ross. But my email's up there. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. And and also anything that people want to encourage Ross, we print it out and send it to him.
Okay.
Means a lot to him.
Is there anything you'd like to add to this at the end? Any final thoughts?
I think we've really, I think it's been a great interview, and I think we've covered.
There was a bunch we didn't cover. Do you know what? I had this kind of structure of things I wanted to go through, but then, I wanted to ask a lot about Ross, but do you know what I think I'd like to do? I'd like to do this again with you sometime.
Okay.
I would almost...
You just go anywhere, right?
I will go anywhere, yeah.
Sure, we'll do it again. We could do it when the Supreme Court thing is decided or whenever you think.
Either way.
I've been happy to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Oh, no, thank you so much, Lyn.
Very, very nice. Anyway, you're the only person who's ever given me flowers for an interview, and that, especially because it was my birthday yesterday.
Well, yeah, I didn't know it was your birthday yesterday. That was a coincidence, and it's just because it's Ross's, and
so sweet.
And I couldn't buy Ross a present, and
it's very nice.
I went to get. It's funny. I was going to get. Went to get coffee this morning at a place across there, and it was a coffee shop and a florist.
Oh, there you go.
So I managed to get coffee and flowers at the same time. But no, Lyn, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, take care and all the best.
Thanks.
Okay, so what did you make of that? I hope you found it as interesting as I did interviewing Lyn, and I would really love your feedback. Please do get in touch. Please do give me a shout if you have any questions. I'm happy to debate the subject. I do see both sides of the argument. I see that the war on drugs has failed, but I also see that there are issues and worries about decriminalising things like drugs. It is a very difficult and emotive subject, but I would love to hear from any of you with your feedback or any questions you may have. I do encourage you to look at the Free Ross website. If you are supportive, do consider making a donation to their cause. And if you want to support the show, please do share this out on social media. Please do get in touch or follow me on any social channels I'm on. And please do visit my website. Okay, thanks a lot. See you soon.